Now, Pavarotti was a good friend.
Welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. As a disclaimer, this channel is for entertainment purposes. These are my opinions, and I'm not here to slander. So with that being said, let's just get started. Okay, now in this video, we're going to do a deep dive into that Hyundai Elantra evidence against Mr. Kohberger. And why is that important? Well, as I've compiled a list of all of the evidence that they claim to have had against Mr. Kohberger in that probable cause affidavit that is so irrelevant now. And again, it hasn't been posted to the iPortal yet. Wasn't for our eyes to see. I keep saying that. But as I go through that, I can only come up with, a few pieces of evidence. As you've seen, if you watched that video I did the other night on the PCA, when I rewrote it in the correct timelines, the evidence they have against Mr. Kohberger is pretty non-existent. Let's just say it. So you've got an eyewitness account, right? DM seeing him with his mask on, his bushy eyebrows in the dark. Now, in a future video, we'll go through why that, well, I may even touch on it in this one, why that is absolutely ridiculous. It would never stand up in court because of the process that has to be taking place for eyewitness identification. It's called a lineup. And with a lineup, you've got to be able to identify somebody's face. And you've got to be able to identify their face in lieu of 5 other people with similar characteristics standing there. You got to be able to pick them out from the other 5. So 5 other people with bushy eyebrows that are dark, I bet she wouldn't be able to pick out much. And the court knows that, and they would never allow that to be an eyewitness account. So that one's gone. But then you've got the Hyundai Elantra that's very, very big in this one. And that's what we're going to dive in and really dig into, is this Hyundai Elantra. Now, in my last video, I got a little bit political. I just wanted to do that because I wanted to explain my intro. I'm not going to continue to be political out there, y'all, so don't worry. This is an Idaho 4 channel. But I did want to get that one out there. Didn't mean to offend anybody. Hope I didn't. But in this one, I think I'm going to open your eyes. You need to watch this one to the end. And this is going to be a revealing video. And what we're trying to do with this is put pressure. I want to put pressure on the prosecution, the judge, and Taylor. They're going to have to expose what this case is really about. Because as we've gone through and looked at the true evidence in this case, there is none, as we're about to dive into this Hyundai Elantra part of it. And by the way, I've read this PCA, I don't want to say 100 times, but I've read it a lot. And every time I go through this thing, I see something else that I know I've read, but it just didn't click. And I think that's because of the mainstream media narrative and probably the narrative of a lot of the content creators on YouTube. I think they take their cues from their commenters, and the commenters, some of them, have nefarious purposes, intentions, and they steer them in the wrong direction. And that stuff gets in our heads and it blocks us. I sit there and read that PCA and I'll just glaze over, I guess. But when I really deep dive and look into that thing and really pick it apart, I'm not even believing the things that I'm seeing. I'm wondering if maybe they're somehow going back and changing stuff online. I mean, I don't know how they could from the state websites, but let me ask you this question before we get into this video and answer it honestly. What did they use? What evidence did they use to determine the time of the atrocity between 4 and 4:20 or 4 and 4:30 a.m.? What evidence did they use to determine that? Do you know? Did they use the coroner's report? Did they use some other data in correlation to the coroner's report? Was it strictly on the eyewitness account of DM? I want you to ask yourself, because everybody I know that's watching this is very familiar with the details of this case. I want you to ask yourself that question. And then as you watch this, prepare to be amazed if you didn't know it. Okay, folks, so we're back to the PCA. The main things we're going to focus on this one, though, as I mentioned, is the white Hyundai Elantra that we've heard so much about since the very beginning. And how important is this white Hyundai Elantra to the actual investigation? How important was it to arrest BRYAN KOHBERGER? Well, let's dive in. Let's see how important that Elantra was. As you can see, we're looking at the original PCA from Brett Payne. And I'm going to start with this section right here. It starts with Mortensen stated she opened her door for the third time and she heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. Mortensen described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. Okay, so that's the eyewitness description, which in the next video, we'll get into some of those other things like the eyewitness description. Good grief. But why is that important? Well, look right here. Where does the time of the homicides actually come from? Was it from the coroner's report? Was it from any real examples of investigative work in this case? No. This is where the time frame for the atrocity comes from. The combination of Mortensen's statements to law enforcement, reviews of forensic downloads of records from Funk and Mortensen's phone, and video of a suspect video. That doesn't make any sense. Video of a suspect video, as described below, leads investigators to believe the homicides occurred between 4 and 4:25 a.m. So the only thing they're basing the time of the atrocity on is DM's statement of seeing the guy with the bushy eyebrows, apparently texts that go back and forth between DM and BF during this time, and finally, the white Hyundai Elantra. Those are the things that law enforcement is specifying the time of the atrocity from. That's it. And when you look at the forensic downloads of records from Funk and Mortensen's phone, those are the text messages that DM and BF were texting back and forth to each other during the time of the atrocity. So when you go back to those Steve G texts, if you're looking to validate them or invalidate them, you'll notice one of the texts showed that when he discussed the closed secret grand jury with one or two of the secret grand jury members, they mentioned text between DM and BF. So one other reason that I would say that those Steve G texts, at least some of them, were very accurate. Now let's skip this entire next part, because that relates to the van shoe that never again is mentioned in this entire probable cause affidavit as evidence against BRYAN KOHBERGER. It's just in there oddly for some reason. But let's get to this Hyundai Elantra, because this apparently is the most important evidence they have in this case. I mean, it determines the time of the crime. So as part of the investigation, an extensive search, commonly referred to in law enforcement as a video canvass, was conducted in the area of the King Road residence. This video canvass was to obtain any footage from the early morning hours of November 13, 2022, in the area of the King Road residence and surrounding neighborhoods in an effort to locate suspects or suspect vehicles traveling to or leaving from the King Road residence. This video canvas resulted in the collection of numerous surveillance videos in the area from both residential and business addresses. I have reviewed numerous videos that were collected and had conversations with other MVD officers, says Brett Payne, Idaho State Police detectives, and FBI agents that are similarly reviewing footage that was obtained. Now, a review of the camera footage indicated that a white sedan, hereafter suspect vehicle 1, was observed traveling westbound in the 700 block of Indian Hills Drive in Moscow at approximately 3:26 a.m. and westbound on Steiner Avenue at Idaho State 95 in Moscow at approximately 3:28 a.m. Now, the video apparently that they're going to refer to that actually got a good view of the vehicle, suspect vehicle number 1, is the video on Steiner Avenue at Idaho State Highway 95 in Moscow at approximately 3:28 a.m. because it says next on this video, referring to the Steiner Avenue video, it appeared suspect vehicle number 1 was not displaying a front license plate. Now, you can absolutely bet that if that was the video that captured the best image of the vehicle, that is the video that the FBI used to identify it as suspect vehicle number 1 and also to identify the year, make, and model of the vehicle. Even though it says it's captured on several different cameras, on this video is the one that they're specifically pointing out. Now, a review of footage from multiple videos obtained from the King Road neighborhood showed multiple sightings of suspect vehicle 1 starting at 3:29 and ending at 4:20. This thing was all over the place. These sightings show suspect vehicle number 1 makes an initial 3 passes by the 1122 King Road residence and then leaves via Walenta Drive. Okay, so now when you get to this part where I've highlighted in blue or green, whichever, those are going to be opinions of Officer Brett Payne. Those opinions are absolutely no evidence whatsoever. That's simply his opinions. And let's see how accurate his opinions are. Let's see how good they are. Now, based off my experience as a patrol officer, this is a residential neighborhood with a very limited number of vehicles that travel in that area during the early morning hours. Upon review of the video, there are only a few cars that enter and exit. Okay, so let's look at this statement real quick. Based off my experience, this is a residential neighborhood with a very limited number of vehicles that travel in that area during the early morning hours. Now, is this a residential neighborhood? Yes, it is. Is this a residential neighborhood that is off campus of a university? Oh, yes, it is. Is this a residential neighborhood that is in proximity of sororities, off-campus university apartments, fraternity houses? Yes, it is. So early morning hours on a Saturday early morning, that would indicate very limited numbers of vehicles that travel in that area during that time? I don't think so. I would think that that would indicate that there should be tons of vehicles traveling in that area at that time because of what area that is and what time that is on a weekend. Now, upon review of the video, there are only a few cars that enter and exit. Well, you can go watch Get a Clue's video on identifying, I think it's suspect vehicle number 5, and he identifies 5 suspect vehicles on video. But you can certainly see that there are many more than 5 vehicles that are traveling in that residential neighborhood in those early morning hours. So the statement of Brett Payne, a very limited number of vehicles, is a false statement. And that would be absolutely torn apart on cross-examination if the attorney does their homework. Now, suspect vehicle 1 can be seen entering the area a 4th time at approximately 4:04 a.m. It can be seen driving eastbound on King Road, stopping, turning around in front of 500 Queen Road, number 52, then driving back westbound on King Road. When suspect vehicle number 1 is in front of the King Road residence, it appears to unsuccessfully attempt to park or turn around in the road. The vehicle then continued to the intersection of Queen Road and King Road, where it can be seen completing a 3-point turn and then driving eastbound again down Queen Road. Well, they really are all over suspect vehicle number 1. However, they've already mentioned that they only have this one. Where is it at? Let's see, where was it at? They had this one, oh, right there. On this video, they only have that one video that really gives them a good view of the car. So all these passes of these cars that they're calling suspect vehicle number 1 are not clear video, as we've seen through many of the content creators' deep dives. In fact, it appears that these possibly could be 3 different vehicles that they're referring to as suspect vehicle number 1. So under cross-examination, that would be a hard one to sell to a jury. But remember, if they're not able to sell this to the jury, this is one of their main pieces of evidence that is correlating to the time of the atrocity. Now, how big is this? But let's keep going on this. Where was I at? Okay. Suspect vehicle number 1 is next seen departing the area of King Road residence at approximately 4:20 a.m. at a high rate of speed. Now, suspect vehicle number 1 is next observed traveling southbound on Walenta Drive. Okay, if that is even suspect vehicle number 1. But what about suspect vehicle number 1? Brett Payne, can you give us your opinion on it? Oh yeah, he's going to give us his opinion next. It's in blue, remember? Let me see my notes. Blue highlight is Payne's opinion and is zero evidence based. Based on my knowledge of the area, which we've already determined is not very good, and review of camera footage. Does he wear glasses? In the neighborhood that does not show suspect vehicle number 1 during that time frame, I believe I can fly. I believe that suspect vehicle number 1 likely exited the neighborhood at Palouse River Drive and Conestoga Drive. So basically what he's saying is, I'm guessing that that's what happened, but I have no freaking idea. Palouse River Drive is the southern edge of Moscow, which proceeds into Whitman County. So if my guess might be correct, then heck, that means it's heading toward Moscow into Whitman County. You can bet that this statement right here was added to this PCA probably right before they arrested Mr. Kohberger, because he's now trying to tie this camera footage of a car driving in circles, or maybe multiple cars. Now he's trying to guess and insinuate that that car, even though we can't see it doing it on camera, is driving towards Moscow. And let me tell you how far Moscow is from there. And Moscow is a small college town. People commonly travel back and forth between them. What does that have to do with anything related to video camera footage of suspect vehicle number 1? Absolutely nothing. Law enforcement officers provided video footage of suspect vehicle number 1 to forensic examiners with the FBI that regularly utilize surveillance footage to identify the year, make, and model of an unknown vehicle that is observed by one or more cameras during the commission of criminal offenses. The forensic examiner has approximately 35 years of law enforcement experience, with 12 years at the FBI. I wonder what he did before he was at the FBI that he was identifying vehicles. Interesting. Now, his specific training includes identifying unique characteristics of vehicles. He uses a database that gives visual cues of vehicles across states to identify differences between vehicles, like if they have a front license plate or not. Now, you'll see my notes there. It says FBI credentials indicate that his or her, whichever, identifications are accurate. So with that kind of experience, expertise, and equipment, you can bet whatever I tell you that year, make, and model of this vehicle is, says the FBI, it will be that year, make, and model. Count on it. That's what my experience tells that it will happen. Now, you can see my notes here, from viewing the cameras in the area of the crime that they were talking about. Like, for instance, that one that captured the vehicle clearly with no front license plate, even though numerous observances of suspect vehicle 1 or several vehicles that look like suspect vehicle 1. The forensic examiner initially, love this word, initially, but he's got 35 years of experience. 12 years with the FBI. He's got training of identifying unique characteristics. He uses a database that's high dollar, visual cues of vehicles across the state. This guy's credentials are impeccable. He never makes a mistake. And he initially believed that suspect vehicle number 1 was a 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra. Okay. So he reviewed the footage of the vehicles at the scene of the crime during the time of the crime, according to the vehicle. So the time of the crime is related to the vehicle, but the vehicle is related to the time of the crime. So that's kind of, one can't have one without the other, I guess. But upon further review, wait a minute. Upon further review, they indicated it could also be a 2011 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra. Now, I want you to pay close attention to this, folks, because at first, this supercar analyzer says it's a 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra from viewing numerous observances, which is at least 1 or more cameras during the commission of a criminal offense, and they did it at the time of the offense. And we know that because based on them viewing that vehicle at the time of the offense, it's led up here to determining the time of the offense, which was kind of interesting. But let's go back down here. Stay with me now. I know I'm kind of jumping around. This is kind of cool. Right? They indicated it could also be a 2011 to 2016. 2011, 2013 the first time based on footage around the crime scene, but upon further review, which could say upon later review of different video footage, they indicated it could also be a 2011 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra, which is a lie. They indicated no such thing, as I'll show you down here. All right. Investigators were given access to video footage on the Washington State University campus located in Pullman, Washington. A review of that video indicated that at approximately 2:44 a.m. on November 13, 2022, a white sedan, which was consistent, not necessarily the one, with a description of the white Elantra known as suspect vehicle number 1. Was it really consistent though? It was observed on WSU surveillance cameras traveling north on Southeast Nevada Street at Northeast Stadium Way at approximately 2:53. Now, when did they receive this camera footage? You know what's interesting? They located, as we went through the PCA the other night, if you haven't watched that video, go back and watch it, because now we truly understand they didn't get on Mr. Kohberger or his car until December 23rd. Because when they located his vehicle at WSU, it had a front license plate and they put it to the side as it wasn't the suspect's vehicle. So at that point, they're probably not going to be looking at all of these video cameras there in Pullman, because they have no idea what video cameras to look at anywhere until they pull his historical CAS data. The video cameras they're far and they're wide. When you circle the area of the crime scene, the assailant could have went in any direction according to them. They had no idea that it was Pullman, Washington until at least December 23rd. So when they pull up this camera footage, you can bet it's after December 23rd. Now, what happened when they reviewed that footage? A white sedan, which is consistent with the description of the white Elantra known as suspect vehicle number 1, was observed traveling northeast, yada, 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 yada. And let's get back down here too, because they provided to the same FBI forensic examiner, okay, same one from up here, they provided him with this footage. And what did he do with it? Well, he did his video analysis, and because he's got 35 years experience, and he identified the vehicle observed in Pullman, Washington as being a 2014 to 16 Hyundai Elantra. Huh. So the same guy looked at video footage of 2 different vehicles and came up with 2 different makes and models. Now you see how the media narrative, because until I dive into these things and do these deep dives, it doesn't hit me why I think the way that I think, because the media narrative always points out this right here. 2011 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra. Right? At first it was a 2011, 2013, but then upon later review, he indicated it could have been a 2011 to 2016. That is not what happened. He looked at video footage and indicated that vehicle was a 2011 to 2013 because those models have specific characteristics. However small, they are specific, and they are not consistent with a 2014 to 2016 model. So when he identified BRYAN KOHBERGER's car, he identified a car that has consistent with that model, that has characteristics that are consistent with a 14 to 16, not a 2011 to 2016 like they've led everybody to believe. It was either this car's suspect vehicle number 1, but it was never seen in the area of the crime scene. This car right here was, though. It was seen in the area of the crime scene. In fact, it was seen so prevalently that based on the time that it was driving around, it determined the time of the crime. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Are we done with this yet? I don't think so. I think we got a little bit more that we can look at right here. Okay, where was I at? And remember, we now know this was done after December 3rd, 23rd, 2022. They got his they got his cast records on his phone. They tried to plot his course of his vehicle. And then it was easy for them to go to Washington State University, pull up their camera footage at that point, identify his vehicle on the camera footage. But again, it wasn't on any camera footage during the time of the atrocity because everything's blacked out from 3 to 5 a.m. So here's my point to this, folks. When you start to go through all the evidence against BRYAN KOHBERGER, I can see why now in the PCA that they literally, let's do this real quick. Just while I've got you here, let's go on and do this. Okay, where are we at? Oh, you know what? I'm not going to do it right now. Let's just keep it right here. But when you go through the PCA, it lists all of the evidence against Mr. KOHBERGER. This was their main piece of evidence, and we can see now the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, is saying the PCA is irrelevant at this point, which, by the way, that still hasn't posted to the Idaho 4 docs yet. As I've mentioned many times, it wasn't for our eyes to see. But as we go through and we eliminate all the evidence that they have against Mr. KOHBERGER, it leaves us with one thing and one thing only. And that is the touch DNA that's transferable on an item that is also movable. So the only evidence whatsoever that links him to the crime is the knife sheath with touch DNA on it. So how did they get to that knife sheath with touch DNA and get to Mr. Kohberger? They're going to say it was the IgG, which is inadmissible in court. But even if it was the IgG, they're not going to convict somebody on one piece of evidence with absolutely nothing else to corroborate it. And they've got him up on 4 capital murder charges with 4 death penalty cases as a result if he's convicted. And there's absolutely no way whatsoever that they could convict him with this type of evidence. So again, it's going to leave us with one of two things only. Number one, either this is the biggest miscarriage of justice that we have ever seen, and this poor guy, BRYAN KOHBERGER, is absolutely innocent. Or number two, they've got a confidential informant, and it's not somebody that says, I seen him there, I heard he was there, I think he was there, he's my brother. I mean, it's none of that. If they've got a confidential informant and they're charging this guy with 4 capital murder charges seeking the death penalty, then this confidential informant they have has direct knowledge of the crime, meaning he either witnessed it, participated in it in some way, or that's it. That's it. And you need to start thinking about that going forward, because I think the pressure needs to be put on the prosecution, the judge, and even Ann Taylor, because she knows this as well, to either bring out the truth, tell us about the confidential informant, open this case up so we know what's really going on, or if you really don't have that, if that is a farce and the evidence that you have against BRYAN KOHBERGER is what we've just discussed, which is nothing but some transfer DNA, then you need to dismiss all charges right now and call this thing quits. Because let me tell you, the evidence they have on this white Hyundai Elantra is non-existent, and under cross-examination would be absolutely destroyed. What other evidence do they have against him? An eyewitness identification? Give me a break. He had on a mask. All she could see was his eyebrows and his height and weight, and that was an approximation. To pull somebody out of a lineup, to actually be an eyewitness identification, you have to have 5 other individuals clearly visible in a lineup along with the assailant, and they have to have similar characteristics as the assailant, and then the eyewitness must identify them based on that. Now, you telling me you're going to put 5 other people in black masks and show them a lineup of that, and she's going to pick out the assailant? That will never hold up in court, I assure you. That one's gone. The hot white Hyundai Elantra, that one's gone. The cast records on his phone that everybody's been talking about, all this technical data and this and that, the cast records on his phone that the prosecution has, that the law enforcement has, says we have no idea where he's at between 3 and 5. He should be excluded as a suspect. We opened up the unmasking of all the phones in the area during the time of the atrocity. His phone wasn't one of them. He should be eliminated as a suspect. There is no other evidence against BRYAN KOHBERGER. Now, would they have found evidence after the fact, after the arrest? Well, let's think about that for just a second. What evidence could they possibly find after the arrest if this thing is what they're suggesting it is, which is a Ted Bundy incel guy? I mean, they're not going to find any evidence. Ann Taylor said they didn't find anything in his car or his apartment, so there's no physical evidence connecting him to the crime. What kind of digital evidence are you going to find? Maybe he followed some of the victims? Well, guess what? The court has already stated that would not be admissible in court. So there's nothing they could find on him after the fact. Well, are they going to find a handwritten, notarized, stamped envelope with a confession in there from him? That might be something that would hold weight. Other than that, there's absolutely nothing. And the prosecution knows this. He says all this is irrelevant, but we're still going to trial and we're seeking the death penalty. So that tells me that they've got a confidential informant. That informant is more than somebody that has indirect knowledge of the events. That is somebody that has direct knowledge of what took place, how it was set up, how it was pulled off, and detailed information on the crime. And he's implicating BRYAN Kohlberger, or she's implicating BRYAN Kohlberger. It's either one of the two. Either that's the case, or this is the biggest miscarriage of justice ever. And if that isn't the case, they need to tell us, and they need to let the guy off and go find the real criminals. That's where we're at right now, folks. Thank you for listening to me. I know I got amped up, but you know what? Like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments and criticisms. Pavarotti is out. Well, I know you didn't think you was getting off that easy. Now, I do want to thank you for taking the time to watch the video, and hopefully you're learning new things as I discover new things. It's amazing. Coming up, though, I wanted to really dive into that Hyundai Elantra, but you know, I still haven't dove in to what I believe actually happened during this atrocity, and that includes that Hyundai Elantra, and it includes how it could have happened, because nobody's ever going to get me to believe that the frats did it, okay? That the boyfriends did it, that some low-level drug dealing was involved. There's no way. Nobody will ever get me to believe that. I know what this case is about. This case is about the mother turning evidence, taking a deal, following through on that deal and setting somebody up and got them arrested. And it was retribution on that one. The other one was the stepmother turning a deal, taking the plea, and agreeing to set somebody up, but she hadn't set them up yet. So her stepdaughter was the message. And that message she heard loud and clear, because she didn't follow through with what she was supposed to do with that drug task force. And guess what her reward was for that? Well, I guess one reward was she got to keep all of her real daughters. The other reward was she was sentenced to 3 to 4 years in the penitentiary for a simple possession charge. Now, how is that fair when you have drug traffickers getting busted for drug trafficking over and over and they get probation? Chew on that one for a minute. But again, please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, post your criticisms, post your thoughts. You know I like to hear those. And until next time, calling all cars, be on the lookout for Pavarotti. Pavarotti is out there calling all cars. Be on the lookout for Pavarotti. We think he is out.